Hello and welcome to the Lost Decades podcast. This is episode 6 covering the years 1900 BC to 1860 BC. I'm Austin,
I'm Andrew.
and we're going to start this week jumping right in on Egypt, like always. And we're going to Senusret II, who we had touched on briefly in the last episode. But do you have what year he started
I do,
ruling?
yeah, I have the years for all of them. He is from 1895 to 1878. So I know we're starting in 1900, but we,
Right.
we got the death of Amenemhat II last episode. So I think we just pick up with Senusret II.
Yeah, we got some wiggle room on these years, but he is continuing the 12th dynasty, and it seems like a pretty prosperous, peaceful time when he's ruling. There's no recorded military campaigns, and there's a decent amount of trade with the Near East, which I feel like basically means they're trading with whoever's in the Peninsula and like
The Levant.
Canaan and the Levant. And then, but I did see they had a couple items from Mesopotamia, like some like lapis lazuli or something. But they did say it probably was like a middleman somewhere in like the Levant. But still, it traveled all that way
Well,
to
I just
Egypt.
thought it was interesting about Senusret II was because the previous ones have been so like crack down on like everybody and like control everything and like defenses and wars and like all this stuff. And I guess it's one of those things where it all paid off because now like they're at their maximum extent.
Mhm.
They're I don't know if it's their maximum extent, but they're huge compared to
They're at
what
a good size for sure, yeah.
and they now he has peace and stability. And not only that, one of the things I read is that he was very well liked by like all the other nobility and stuff like that, and the other
Hmm. Like
rulers and like his vassals and stuff, if you will.
like from
Um,
other kingdoms or like
like the
the
nomarchs.
nomarchs. Okay. Okay, yeah.
Which
So was
which
it
is it's funny because you'd think that like, well, there's always gonna be some nomarchs that like him and don't like him and stuff, but they said, but this was like a strict contrast where most of the nomarchs did not like the previous kings. And they were huge fans of this guy. And in fact, a lot of them like wrote things like, "Oh, he's so awesome, he's so amazing." Like, I don't know.
yeah, like hymns or something? I forget what they call that, but some of the pharaohs have, or maybe I'm thinking of Mesopotamia. But yeah, that was a big thing at this time was to write like that was almost most of the like poetry and stuff was essentially just talking about how amazing the current ruler is.
Yeah.
And speaking of the nomarchs, I won't get into it yet, but with Amenemhat the third, or no, sorry, Senusret the third, something happens with the nomarchs.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So that's why it's a funny transition where the nomarchs are just like really chill. There's a lot of peace. So this guy, I know he expanded one of the oases. I believe I wrote
Or the
it down.
Fayum, I think,
Yeah.
which I think
And
is still a
it,
pretty major part of Egypt.
yeah. And it's just interesting because he turned like kind of just a typical oasis into like a
Oasis.
big bread basket sort of thing,
Mhm.
creating a lot of food, and apparently a lot of people wanted to live there. It was like an amazing place to live for the time, at least.
Hmm.
Um,
Egypt's such a unique area. It's like, okay, we've got this the epitome of a desert, just like sand. That's all there is. It's super hot. And then but if you're on the river, you can like survive. Um, except for like maybe there's a couple oases that you could like theoretically live in. Like
mhm.
no, very few places are like that, I feel like.
And they definitely made the most of it. That's what's funny is they're just all the land along it.
Hmm.
One of the things that was interesting about this guy too is he founded that new town. It's Cahoon today, but I can't remember. It was like Senusret Sot. It had his name in it essentially, and it was like a new town. But what I thought was funny too is, well, he was making a new town for like workers and stuff like that. It was mainly there to like build his pyramid. Now, granted, the town has lasted to today, I believe, but it's just funny that it was mainly there to build the pyramid so that it was easier to have the workers and the materials there instead of bringing them from all over. Um,
Interesting.
but
Yeah,
there's a lot of records apparently about the city planning and stuff, so I thought that was kind of cool.
that's cool. I know it is interesting how something this old can have something randomly super detailed like that building plan. But then I was looking ahead, and there's going to be a time. All right, one thing I did not quite realize is that so we started this podcast essentially with the end of the first intermediate period, and after the 12th dynasty, which we still have a couple more pharaohs, but after this dynasty ends, that's the end of the Middle Kingdom, and we're gonna
Yeah.
have the second intermediate period. So
The
it'll
Middle
be
Kingdom's only two dynasties.
right. So we are really in kind of the peak of the Middle Kingdom, literally, and I think people say Senusret the Third specifically is sort of like the easy to say as the peak of the whole, which is just crazy to think about. I didn't realize we were
Yeah.
that close to the intermediate period.
One of the things I
And
oh
sorry, you
sorry.
go for it.
Oh no, because it was slight change of subject. Because one of the things I found was because I always like looking up biblical stuff,
Hmm.
and no one really agrees on this, but it's just interesting that some scholars think that this is when Joseph, from like Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I mean, that's the movie, but when
Right from
he
the
comes
Bible.
to Egypt and like helps the Pharaoh and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool. I actually meant to look up what was going on, in the Bible at this time. So
So
that's
some
cool.
people think this was that Pharaoh. Now, there's nothing. I'll be honest. There's nothing really to
What? Yeah. What
corroborate
is that?
that, but
How do
yeah.
why do they think that?
Well, one of them is because there's this waterway of Joseph, but literally it's called Bahir Yosef. And so people think it has to do with how Joseph helped. I'll be honest, I don't remember the story of Joseph that well, but I guess he like helped. One of the things he helped with was agriculture and stuff. I know he helped them before a big famine. And so there was like a waterway they think is named after him. But to be fair,
Hmm.
it's not like Joseph was a super
Super uncommon.
obscure
Yeah.
name in the time period
But
either.
it was someone that got a whole river named after them. So I mean, it's definitely possible. And
Yeah.
I'm down. Before by next week, I will try to look more into the Bible stuff because I do think that's interesting. Because growing up, the Bible felt so like to me, it just kind of felt like the Lord of the Rings, where it just was
Yeah.
like really like mythological. But I mean, the Old Testament, a lot of it is just how they kind of wrote down their history. It's like, all
Yeah.
right, and there was this guy, and it's like it's as trustworthy as, we're going off just the name of a random year is like
Yeah.
so it's like I'll take, an actual book over that.
Yeah.
So, what I have here, I was going to also kind of shift the topic, but still on this time period, it was saying that this was a really big time when a lot, speaking of, actually, it's fitting in perfectly. No, it's just saying how this was a big time for, um, they're calling them Western Asiatic, but it just means like people from the Levant coming into Egypt. They're sort of like slowly migrating more and more into Egypt, especially kind of like the western part. And I saw,
Especially the stability and all that.
yeah, and not to spoil things, but when we get to the second intermediate period in a couple episodes, they are one of the dynasties, is people of this descent. So this is when they're coming in, and then in a couple of decades, they're going to have their little sort of like a mini dynasty where it's not all of Egypt, but it's like a chunk of it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so let's see. Is there anything else you want to say about Senusret the second?
Not the second, because the third is actually the more
Yes, I
famous.
wanted to really get into the third. Yeah. So, like I said, a lot of people consider him the most kind of popular or, I don't know, most memorable or uh, powerful pharaoh of the 12th dynasty and of the entire Middle Kingdom. And they ruled from Memphis, right? Or
I believe
near
so.
Memphis. But
Because,
one
yeah.
thing he did, so I had mentioned that there was something going on with the nomarchs, but because he was concerned about losing power and entering an intermediate period, they wouldn't have called it that, but he wanted to consolidate power, so he made all of the nomarchs rule from, I guess, Memphis, from his, palace, from his city.
Yeah.
So I kept thinking of Versailles, even though it wasn't
Yep.
the same. It's
That's
the same strategy.
it is, which is really funny because it doesn't happen that much. Definitely other people have done it too, but it's very uncommon. It seems like a pretty effective strategy.
It is. That's actually one thing that I think is really cool is like there's certain things that like the Babylonians or the Egyptians do that stops being a thing like in or was never a thing in Europe, like some tradition with kings or something. Like just how maybe like the king always has their firstborn son will become the next king, whereas like in, like Babylon or something that's not always the case, but then I don't know. Anyway, sometimes they're ahead of their time, you know? It's like
Yeah.
they'll do stuff that then comes back into fashion and it's like, oh wow, this was happening like 2000 years before. And the people might not even they don't even know that. They don't know they're
Yeah.
copying Senusret III or whatever. So
So
I
it's
also
funny though, because
saw
speaking of Senusret III and all those people coming in when it was his father, apparently
yeah,
that kind of caused some instability and stuff too. That's why he was
right.
less trustful of the
Oh,
nomarchs. They were gaining a lot of power because it was with so many people and it being so peaceful, it was hard to govern this many people and this many cities and this many things like that. So the nomarchs gained
right.
more and more autonomy.
That makes sense actually. Wow. And I saw that also, so he really pushed into the south
Yeah,
and
into Nubia.
to right into I don't know if I have a map of it somewhere. The like basically the third cataract.
Yeah, because they control up to the second cataract now. Well, like, and that was from Amenemhat the second, I believe. It might have even been Senusret the first, but got it all the way to the second
Second
cataract,
cataract. And now he
and that's
essentially
Wawat. And so there's a lot of gold, there's a lot of stuff there, and in fact, it's funny. Well, funny in a morbid way, I guess, but
mhm.
since that's his territory. Yet apparently he would like pillage it and raid through there a lot anyway, kind of to make an example to the other Nubians of like, hey, don't fuck around, don't try to mess with anything down here. And because the Nubians were gaining some power, they weren't getting territory or anything, but they were kind of uniting and getting stronger.
And the
And he,
Nubians were also, I think that was called the Kingdom of Kush, right? And it
it
was
is, yes, it
it was
is, it is.
Kerma.
And because
And
it's
maybe,
funny
yeah,
because they're the Nubians, but I've also heard people call them the Kushites.
right.
So,
So yeah, those are interchangeable, I guess. Yeah.
um, but because of all his raiding stuff, well, one, he built a lot of forts and stuff down there, in
Right.
Wawat. Even more forts, even more walls and defensive fortifications. And then all of that, all the pillaging stuff he was doing is bringing back tons of gold and tons of money and tons of food and creating almost like not really a golden age, I guess, for Egypt, but like they were wanting for naught, even the common people. Like, not that they were living like kings or anything, but they were not struggling for food. They were not struggling for
Stable.
money or clothes or any.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, it seems like a pretty solid time. And it says that he was among the few Egyptian kings who were deified and honored with a cult during their own lifetime. So
That's
during his
cool.
lifetime, he was, yeah, I think one of the first, or at least one of the few in general, that was like, I'm a god.
Yeah, because looking at it, it says particularly in the Nubian regions, which is interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think he really focused on that area to kind of show he was in charge. And so that makes sense. Like that's where he had the biggest impact because he was spending all his attention there. And I saw this image right here is actually from his 16th year, and it's the border stela of Senusret III. It's in, I guess, the Altes Museum in Berlin. But it's kind of cool. Like just the fact that it on the like we have a translation of it. Like you could go and just read exactly what this
Hmm.
says, which I think is pretty cool. And also, while I'm talking about the images, I had kind of rediscovered this. I know you had
Oh
sent me
yeah, I
the
remember
thing.
this.
So for listeners, it's basically a spreadsheet of a ranking, I guess, of like the most powerful civilizations from every decade. So I just
Based
thought it
on
was kind of cool
size,
to
at
look
least
at
for this, yeah.
now that I kind of know most of these, like the ones on the top. It was fun to look at and see, like, oh yeah, like Um, right in 2000, we've got like Isim's only in seventh place, but then by 1990, Isim like moves up to fifth place, and then it's super stable. And then you see like by 19 like 100, Larsa pops up,
Yeah.
and then you see
Then they're
Isim,
right next to each
and then
other.
they're
Yeah,
right
Lars
next to each
Isman
other.
and Larsa.
And then by it looks on according to this by 1860. which is where we end this episode, it officially is the first time that it fully has Larsa like way above Isin.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad we have that. But let's see. The other cool thing about Senusret the Third was this is not really cool, but he's the son of Senusret the Second, which isn't always the case for pharaohs. It's not always just like their son. Sometimes, usually it is. But his mom, I'm gonna try to say his mom's name. Kenemet Nefer Hedjet the first.
Okay.
It's literally like 25 letters long. Like it sounds kind of shorter when I say it out loud, but it's such a long looking name.
I think I've seen that. Because also isn't like his mom also his aunt or something? You get what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they
I
do the
think
Targaryen
Senusret married
thing.
his sister. Yeah,
Yeah.
his sister wife. The other cool thing was that there's this legend called the Tales of Sesostris that was kind of like this ancient. Oh, like Herodotus, who was
Yeah.
one of the first historians. He basically has in his like history books or whatever, which you can't always trust them, but he does have one called Sesostris, and people think this legend of this like really powerful, I think they just call him kind of like an African king or like Egyptian king, how he conquered into like the Levant and like I think even into like Europe according to this like legend or whatever.
Yeah.
I just thought that was cool because maybe he did go up into like cross the Mediterranean and was like fighting up in Greece or
That would
something.
be interesting. Yeah, because with
Yeah.
a lot of these, we only know fractions of the stuff. I mean, they have a lot of info, but I mean, what we get is
Mhm.
mainly from temples or city records and stuff, and not everything is going to be there,
And at the
especially on
time,
Rome.
like they wouldn't care as much about the people like on the other side of the Mediterranean. I'm sure they're interested, but they're so far, and like even if he did go and like conquer some areas, um, maybe if you live in Egypt, it's just you just don't even really care that much. But was there anything you wanted to say more about what's going on in Egypt before we jump into Mesopotamia?
Um, Probably not, because we got a lot of Mesopotamia.
We got a lot. So yeah, that's one thing I will say about this period in particular is it's sort of like the end of the Isin Larsa period, and by the end of this episode, it feels like it's the first kind of spark of like Babylon and like
Hmm.
Assyria are like still small, but they're growing. And there's just a lot of this is really why it's called the Isin Larsa period and isn't just called like a more conventional name, is that there's just so many little kind of cities that have power at this time. There's not really like one king who is like even like a Gungunum or something where it's like, oh yeah, he was
Mhm.
dominant for like 50 years or something.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll start with our friends in Isin. And
So, technically, Ninurta from last episode is in his last days, but we can just cover the very last thing he
uh,
did because I know
what's the last thing?
Gungunum took Nipper from him, and then he got it back after Gungunum died, and then he died.
Okay.
So now we're on to Bursuen. Suen?
Urswin. Yeah.
Bursuen.
So he was the seventh king of the first dynasty of Isin. He ruled for 21 years, about. And it says here it was an ebb and flow over the religious centers of Nippur and Ur.
Yeah, I mean, because for the next few kings, we kind of see Nipper getting passed around a lot. Oh, well, not passed around to be fair, just taken from one another a lot.
Right. Because again, that's the city that if you control Nippur, you control Mesopotamia.
Yeah, because you're king of Sumer and Akkad.
Right. And um, he likes to compare himself to shepherds. His titles were the shepherd who makes Nippur content, mighty farmer of Ur. He has a couple other titles, but I don't know. It's interesting that they really identify as shepherds. Like, I think animals must have been a
I think it's
pretty
just another one of those, nobles trying to be like, "Oh, we're common people like you." Not saying that they're common because again, they're king gods, but they're like, "No, but we can relate to your guys' struggles. We
Well,
understand."
I think there's kind of a reason, like even like Jesus uses like shepherd as like a metaphor a lot because I think it's a good way to be like, I'm the leader, but I'm a very
Mhm.
gentle leader.
Yeah.
Like I am in charge. It's undeniable that like the shepherd is in charge of the sheep, but like you don't think of a shepherd as in the same way you think of like a cowboy or something or someone who's like whipping their bull or whatever. It's like, they're just kind of like guiding them where they should go. They're
Yeah.
chilling. Again, and it makes sense for like more of a peace. Well, never mind. I was gonna say peaceful time, but that was Egypt. But 22 years isn't bad. But he does have a lot
Yeah.
of wars, so it wasn't exactly peaceful.
But yeah, I mean, he lost Nipper, recaptured Nipper. I mean, he honestly kept giving dedications and stuff because he wanted to show that, I'm king of Sumer and Akkad and the gods favor me, regardless of how many cities he lost. I mean, I heard him and several of the other kings still touting themselves as like kings of Ur and kings of Uruk and stuff, which they do not control.
And
Like,
just to kind of set the scene, he's contemporary with the end of the reign of Abessari and then that of Sumuel, who are the kings of Larsa. So
yes.
that's who's ruling in Larsa at this time. But is there anything else about Berswin?
I mean, it was just focusing on the fact that it's kind of a key reason this is called the Is and Larsa period is characterized by near constant
Mhm.
warfare between the two cities for control of ancient Sumerian holy sites. Yeah, I put that down because it was like a description of this time period, and I was like, well, that feels impactful.
And you can kind of think of Isin as like sort of middle northern Mesopotamia, and then Larsa is more the southern Mesopotamia.
So then, do we want to just go over to Larsa for his two contemporaries?
That's a good question.
Because we can kind of
Uh,
just talk about their perspective during this time
sure.
period.
So, do you want to talk about Abessari?
Yeah, because we don't know a lot about him. And again, just for the listeners, it's interesting that a lot of what we know comes from this practice of year names, where all the kings
Hmm.
every year gave themselves a name and a title, essentially describing their most important event that year. And so we can kind of piece together what happened during their reign by just looking at the different year names. So that's where a lot of this comes
So,
from.
yeah, I think the biggest one is in his ninth year, he smote the city of Isin.
I even wrote that down because I was just like, I didn't know what he meant by smote because I knew smote is like past tense for smite, but I was just like, what does that mean though? Like, so I was
Yeah,
looking it up and they're like, so it's usually, especially in context with Mesopotamia, it means like a battle, like they won a battle against them.
but they
Not
did.
always
Yeah,
like
it sounds like they
decisive.
didn't. He didn't conquer Isin, but he
Hmm.
just like messed it up.
Yeah, he like beat them in a battle and like showed them who's boss. And I mean,
Right.
his victory ended Isin's period of supremacy. So, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Larsa basically is coming out and saying, we're on top now.
And Isin will
Isin's
never.
days are over. But Isin is still there. That's the key thing. This isn't like the end of
Mhm.
Ur where someone just came in and just like cut their head off. It was
Right.
more like a slow process. So Isin still has sway. It's kind of like two superpowers going at it.
Right. Well, yeah, not exactly superpowers, but
Well, I meant
reasonable powers
superpowers of
of today.
lower Mesopotamia.
Right, true, true. Sorry, something just fell. So, who do you want to move to now?
Okay, well, probably just Samuel.
Okay, so he's the next in line
Because he
in
ruled for a
Larsa.
long time, but he's the next line. He
Yeah.
ruled a little bit during the same time as Bersuen, but then also during Lipit and Lil, who were both from Isin. And so we're talking about um, Samuel from Larsa. It threw me off seeing that name, but again, they keep all the names like their correct translation from Akkadian. So it's just funny to see a name that you would like not even bat an eye at modern day, and it's like a king in
Yeah,
Mesopotamia.
it is
Like,
funny.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I'm
It's
seeing it here.
funny.
You could also say it as Sumuel. It's like Sumu dash
Very
El.
true. No, very true.
Uh,
But it's still just funny to
but
see.
no, but you think about it, and it's like it kind of makes sense because this is basically at least near the region in the Bible where like all these names that we still use
Hmm.
now started. So it is funny. Yeah, you're like, oh, Joshua.
It is just funny to hear it next to Gungunum and
Yeah,
Libet Inu, and then it's like
right.
Samuel. It's like, okay.
Yeah. But I don't know, it's weird because I feel like he ruled for like
40
20 years or
years?
whatever,
No, 30
or
years.
30,
Yeah.
30, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
there's not much about him,
I mean,
really.
I was able to find some stuff, but again, it's more just going off the
It's
year
just a bunch
names
of battles.
because he conquered a lot of stuff. He was like the most aggressive and successful ruler. Well, expansionist ruler because he's more
Yeah.
focused on expansion than stability and control.
I have
Um,
here he campaigned against Aku Akusum, Kazalu, Uruk, Penaritum, Subum, Kish, Kazulu, Nana Isha, Uma, and they're all, yeah, those are all small villages along the Euphrates.
Yep, those were all things he took though, which shows just how much they're expanding and by contrast how little um Isin can stop them. They're just basically like rampaging through and being like, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And Isin's sort of just like, oh no, we're still kings of Sumer and Akkad. Yeah, they're I don't know what they're doing, but yeah, we're still in charge. Um, because
Yeah.
one of the things I put is that he famously used water warfare because he diverted water from the Euphrates in major canals away from Isin. And so he cut off their water supply, and so they couldn't grow food, and it led to a famine and long-term decline. And it's just crazy to think about that. I mean, it makes sense. It's just funny to we're so used to a lot of these rulers just going in with all their swords and stuff. And he's like, what if we just made the river go a different direction so it didn't even go into their city? It's like, holy shit, dude, that's kind of intense.
I know even today that would be a pretty intense. You're in a war and you like divert a river.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, so let's see. Do we want to go? Who would be after Sumiwel? Because he ends in 1866. So technically, there's 6 more years. Do we care about the next person, or
um, we could talk about him a little bit, or we could talk about him next time. I have notes for him, but we could talk for him
let's
next time
just
if
say
we
his
want.
name? Like who?
Nuradad. I think it's
Nuradad.
probably Nur-Adad. I kind of made it one name.
Nuradad. Yeah. Honestly, it is the basic thing to say, but breaking the words apart really does help. I'm like, oh, okay, wait, it's just like the whatever. So
Well, I mean, they hyphenate. It's funny how many of these people have
yeah.
hyphenated names. Um,
But yeah, it feels very like I feel like whenever you see that it feels very ancient, like to see a hyphenated name like that. But it does kind of make it easier to break down. You're like, oh, okay, it's just like Lipit Inlul. If that was
So
like
then
one
going
word,
back to Isin again, because
yeah,
now it's Lipit Enlil, and he was also with Samuel. He was in Isin. He was trying to stop him from taking over, but Lipit
right.
Enlil literally only ruled for 5 years, which is super short. And I thought it was of note that they're a lot short. Like it's not the main reason, I guess, but one of the things you can see as a reason that Isin is falling is they're having so many kings with short reigns, whereas Larsa is having these kings with long reigns. So it's leading for more stability and more strength and stuff. Whereas Isin's just going from like king to king to king to king, constant succession, constant like new person in charge, new things going on. So
Sense, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So I mean, the city they were more and more. Isin was starting to be just Isin and tiny little surrounding towns, less and less that they had control over. Granted, they still have Nipper, but it looks like it's been switching back and forth because they talk about king names of him doing things at Nipper. They have record of it, and then other kings doing things at Nipper, and then he's back again. So clearly, it's going back and forth. Um, and he keeps positioning himself as, oh, I'm king of Uruk and and again all these places as they control less and less and less, which is funny when it's contrasted with Larsa, who's taking so much yet not really being like, well, we're kings of everything. They're just sort of like, no, no, we're just Larsa, just doing our thing. I mean, that will change, but it is just funny.
yeah.
Yeah, we're humble. I mean, I guess you have to be humble when you're following Gungunum. You got such a
Mm.
cool name and you did so many cool things. So people are like, all right, yeah. I mean, I'm no Gungunum, but
Okay.
I'm pretty good.
But honestly, that is kind of how a lot of them were actually during this whole time, is they would admit that, oh yeah, these, like Sargon of Akkad or whatever, or like these people from the past or whoever was like just as a concept, they were like they really respected it. They were like, oh yeah, but that's a really good city.
Yeah.
And I saw that for Lipit Inlil, who's again in charge of Isin, it ended a period of relative stability. So he's really kind of the first of really when it starts getting very shaky. And both he and his successors don't really have any like royal hymns or prayers or anything. Like they were pretty forgotten by everybody.
I mean, yeah, it says he faced a landscape where local governors and rival Amorite chieftains were beginning to ignore Isin's authority. And it's like, I mean, that's never good.
Kind of funny. I like the end of his article. It's like the year names following his year names, all somewhat monotonously commemorate generous gifts to the Temple of Enlil. It just like says that over and over. Like, it's like he's just not really doing anything else. It's like, well, I did donate. Like that's basically what you have to do as a pharaoh or as a king is like, well, I didn't really do like jack shit this year, so like I'll just like donate like a bar of gold to the temple, and then that'll be like what I did this year. That's
Yeah.
like my achievement. All right. Well, so then after Lipit Enlil, it's Era
Era
Imiti, right?
Era Amiti, another short ruling king. He's literally ruling for 7 years.
Yeah.
And this is going to surprise you, Austin, but he struggled to secure and hold on to Nipper. I don't know if you realize
Oh,
this, but
really?
yeah,
That's
he
really special.
it's becoming like kind of a tradition of the kings to just both
Mhm.
lose and recapture Nipper over and over again.
Important. You gotta, be because which god is in Nipper? Is it
Nipper isn't it
Enlil?
Enlil? Yeah, because
Yeah,
Nipper's the
that's the king
capital.
of the gods, yeah. So Era Amiti, like yeah, he was really into Nipper, and it says that they're not sure his relationship with the former king.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe his son, but probably not.
And you know your reign is bad when literally like I did a bunch of research on him and the most significant thing about him is his death.
His gastronomic mishap.
Yes, it's the legend of the substitute king, which first of all, this is a weird concept. I mean, obviously everything about this is
It's
weird,
a
but I
really
just
crazy concept.
it's just a funny thing that they did. Like so supposedly like when certain things would happen, they would like have an ill omen that would predict a king's death. So supposedly what they were supposed to do is essentially like put a statue because I was looking into this that like is so it's supposed to be like the king's curse. So basically I just thought this was hilarious. He's like,
Yeah,
I'm not king. Actually, this statue, they put the statue on the throne and they're like, this is actually the king. And he sits there and he absorbs all of the curse.
bad energy.
And there's someone who's a substitute who's like taking care of that statue. And the whole point's supposed to be at the end, you destroy the statue and you kill the guy who took care of the statue, and that gets rid of the curse.
Yeah,
But in this case, the curse was too strong because literally
right.
I wrote down the different things because there's the omen and then there's the ritual to deflect the curse. He appointed a commoner named Enlil as substitute king to sit on the throne and attract the bad
Gardener.
luck.
He was the gardener.
Yeah, and then in a freak accident, man, while Enlil was acting as king, Era Amidi died from
Right.
choking on
Hot porridge.
broth or porridge or
Yeah.
something. And
He had a
then it
gastronomical mishap.
and then Enlil was like, "Well, I mean, I'm the king and he died, so I guess I'll just keep being king."
Yeah, the gardener's the king of Larsa now.
So they like literally
Yeah,
just put a
that's
guy. Sorry,
sick.
yeah, that was my confusion. I thought it was a statue. So, but there was a guy taking care of it. But no, they put the actual
Is it?
guy, and they're like, "You're king now." Like, imagine
You're
that if
right,
someone's
though.
like, "Dude, I predict the king is gonna die next year," and the king's like, "Okay, this guy's actually king," and then he puts him there.
I could see you. I think maybe if you because definitely dug more into it than I did. So like maybe it was just like there was a statue on the throne and he took care of it or whatever. But it's like essentially he is like sort of the king so that he can absorb the curse, but like they don't want to just be like, all right, you're gonna sit on the throne and just be the king for now, because then it's a lot easier for him to just be like, cool, I'm the king. But it's like,
Yeah,
no, the statue's the king. You're just
yeah.
taking care of the
And
statue.
as funny as I'm making it sound, it tracks for them considering they paraded their god statues around. They would dress them, they would feed them, they would water them, they would like
Mm-hmm.
bring them all over. So I guess it kind of fits to just put one on the throne and be like, no, he's absorbing all the negative energy. But in this
Yeah.
case, it really, because we're not talking about him this time, we'll talk next episode, but it conveniently worked out for Enlil Bonnie to be like, oh, I guess I'm king now. So,
Because he literally just becomes king, yeah. And before we move on, real quick, that just reminded me of when we were in Finland, right? It was no, it was Estonia. When we were in Estonia, we went on like a little tour, and he was talking about how like the native religion in Estonia like really like basically like worships or like honors like they're almost it's like spirits essentially. It's kind of like Japanese like folk religion, but it's like they essentially like honor like the boulders and stuff, which seemed kind of funny. But I feel like that's how like most, I feel like that was kind of the default religion at this time, like
yeah,
pre Christianity, obviously, even almost pre like Judaism, pre like Greek religion and stuff. It's like it was sort of just okay, maybe you kind of worship the gods of the city, but then also you see like a statue or like even maybe like a tree or like a certain hill or something as like basically a god. It was like the gods
yeah,
were made more like tactile. They were like physical more than we think of them now, I think.
yeah. No, I
Um,
agree.
yeah. So then, yeah, like we said, the old gardener in Lil Bonnie, and it says it might be apocryphal, like, who knows, but I'm saying it definitely happened. It's real. And the gardener
And then
becomes
what's
king.
interesting too is again a bad sign for Isin is this breaks their dynasty. Like it's not that it's a new dynasty. I mean, you'd almost assume it was, but the dynasty does continue.
Right, you
But
think it would be.
it breaks the hereditary, you know, father to son or brother, that's been passed down for the past.
That's a good question. I guess a dynasty only technically ends when like a complete outsider like takes over. If it's sort of like within the city, even if it's the random gardener,
I
it's
think it's
still
supposed
the
to
same
be now.
dynasty.
This is probably putting too much of a modern spin on it, but it's supposed to be like when the last name is the same ish. Like, not exactly the same, but like you can trace your lineage back to that same last name.
But I'm saying for this, these guys don't even have last names, I feel
No,
like,
no,
right?
no, true. So I guess it's like all I mean by that is like it's as long as there's some sort of familial tie, no
Hmm.
matter how distant, that it's the same dynasty. It's when it's literally there's no familiar tie at all. Just somebody who's yeah, like you said, a complete outsider with no ties to the family in
Well,
any.
but then I guess, but then this guy was just a gardener, but he's still in the first dynasty.
Which is why I don't understand. Because yeah, if he was a
That's what
gardener,
makes
it
me
should
think
have.
I don't think they have to be related. I think they would be like, okay, like he was at least like the same like ethnicity or whatever, or like he lived in the city. So it's like, but then if like the someone from like an Elamite came and conquered, then it would be like a new dynasty. I don't know. That's just my guess, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So in Lobani actually did quite a bit, right? I mean, he did. There's at
Well,
least
we're probably not gonna. I wasn't gonna go into in Lobani because
right. He literally starts in 1860. So we'll
yeah,
just let you know that the gardeners ruling in Isin. So could be worse. I'm sure it was had good horticulture.
yeah. And then the foreshadowing for the future now is there's this little city called Babylon,
Mm,
and this man named Sumu Abum,
yes.
1894 to 1881. He's the founder of the first dynasty of Babylon. He's the founder of it. He was the
Mhm.
first Amorite ruler of Babylon. Now, Babylon did exist. So, because I was looking into this, it's not like because
Yeah.
I guess we talked about it earlier. He didn't create this city.
And I
He
guess
basically,
on this map it weirdly has an E at the end, but it looks like it's pretty far north. I didn't really actually realize
it
that till right
is.
now. It's like
It's
way
because,
up
I
there,
mean,
or like
they're
northwest.
not too involved with the Isin Larsa stuff for now. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? They're
That's what
kind of,
makes it,
I mean,
yeah,
because
they're
the
really
more
their own
Isin Larsa
thing.
are.
And they're technically Amorites, right?
Yeah, they're Amorite. He's the first Amorite ruler of Babylon, though, because Babylon wasn't before.
Oh, so he conquers Babylon somehow, or
Yeah, he essentially what happens is he conquered or yeah, a small piece of land. It was originally controlled by Kazalu, and it included Babylon. Babylon was just like the biggest ish city, but it still is not that significant because they talk about how he didn't call himself a king. He was just sort of like, oh yeah, I'm in charge of Babylon because they were just trying to imply that it shows the insignificance of Babylon at the time.
right?
That like just because you control Babylon doesn't make you a king. No one's going to respect you for that.
It's like being the mayor of like Toledo, Kansas, or something.
Yeah.
Apologies to any Toledo people out there.
Um, And then this is the part that kind of confused me because, well, I guess he has some cities that he conquered, and I was trying to do research on it because it was a little confusing because he did conquer Uruk. I got confirmation
Uh,
of that. They're not sure if he conquered Kisura because there is another king with his same name but with like a different, slightly different variation on it, who also supposedly conquered Kisura. So they're not sure if that was him or not. And then what was really confusing me was it said he conquered Kish. And then it said his son conquered Kish. So I'm not sure who actually did it.
Interesting. Okay,
But
but
it's important because Kish is where it started. Kish is where Sumer started. It was the first city to ever have a king. It started off the Sumerian Empire. So, but by this point, it's very insignificant. Like, it's more of a cultural thing, not even religious. It's more of just like, oh, like we got Kish, but like, it's funny that even the people who call themselves kings of Sumer and Akkad didn't really care that much. I mean, granted, I'm sure they'd be happy to have Kish, but they're not like, oh, I really want that.
you
Like,
know that's how it goes. There's rise and fall of cities.
hmm
Uh,
um, but
so yeah, pretty
he
big
starts
deal.
building the first walls about Babylon that eventually will become famous. Not specifically his walls, but I mean, Babylon's walls are famous way down the line, and he's building the first set of walls around Babylon that's ever existed.
It's a cool concept of this, like Sam. So his name's Sumu Abum, but someone like this, where he's a solid king of like a mid-sized city, and he's like, like probably, like on his deathbed, he's like, all right, like I did a pretty good job. Like I'm no, king of Mesopotamia, but I'm not doing too bad. But he has no idea that I don't even know if it's his ancestor, but like in a couple,
No, it is. I think it's his ancestor, but like, yeah, he's
it's
flicking a
Hammurabi.
domino that he doesn't realize what's going to happen.
Yeah, that it'll be this guy that pretty like even people that don't care about history like know the name Hammurabi,
Yeah.
which is cool.
So
Um,
yeah, most of the stuff I have about him is just building up Babylon. Some of those conquests, like I said, he did to kind of give Babylon a little bit of a buffer zone. Um, and he dedicated several shrines to the city's patron god Marduk, which established it as the city's deity, like central important deity, which obviously comes up much later as well. But he's the one who also started doing that, which I just thought it's interesting that, like you said, he just did kind of all the stuff that ended up setting in motion, like Marduk. It's a name that, like, I mean, it's not that a lot of people know, but I feel like it's used for a lot of.
I've definitely heard that. Yeah,
It's used in a lot of like other made up mythologies or other mythologies, like or video games or movies. Sometimes it's like name used. It's just crazy.
people
Um,
love using Babylonian gods as like demons in
yeah.
video games and stuff.
So
Wait,
yeah,
so
he
say again,
conquered
he started
Kish.
what? He like invented the concept of Marduk, or what did he do?
He didn't invent it. It's just that I don't think the city had a central patron. So Marduk existed, but he was the one who essentially
He,
said, I'm
uh,
going to build shrines to Marduk
right,
in
right.
Babylon. And he
Okay, so
became
he
the city's
essentially was
patron.
like, "All right, our city needs a god." That's actually I was going to bring this up because I think this is I know we've kind of talked about this, but I just can't. It's like my special interest, this concept of like how each of these like cities has a god, and you
Yeah.
can almost just see the legends of the gods and like the whatever it's called, how the gods are connected, like the genealogy of the
The
gods and
Pantheon.
everything. The pantheon, yeah, it's almost like you could read it as just like history almost of like okay like oh or not even just that the myths tell the story, but it's more like the Babylonian interpretation of this god has him as like more powerful than like the Larsa interpretation of the same god, but because it's like their city god, he like gets more and more important like in their stories, and like
Yeah.
now he's the god of like agriculture because like this city was really good at farming. And I just think that's such a cool concept of like you almost have each city has a god, and how powerful they are is just a reflection of how powerful that city is.
Yeah. No, I think it's really cool, which is how it's interesting that Enlil ended up becoming so powerful because Nipper was really powerful, not on its own, but under Sumer and Akkad. And then it's just kind of funny that now it's been that way so long, it's just respected.
That Enlil's the king of the gods, yeah.
Well,
So
because
then
all these kings, when I was reading about this time period, like even just this, the 1900 to 1860, every single king, when it was like Babylon or Isin or Larsa, is like going to Nippur and like
mhm.
building things and
Yeah,
like
they're
giving
upset.
money and all this stuff.
Yeah. So after what's his name that we were just talking about, Samu Abum, we've got Samu
Samu
Lael.
Samu Lael.
Samu Lael.
I don't know.
So,
It almost sounds like some sort of like
oh,
I
well,
don't know.
El, like I talked about a couple episodes ago, was a god, where like Elohim probably comes from. So it's like Samu Lael. Um, so he kind of continued his, well, I guess father or
Yeah,
growth.
and that's like I said. It's he. It says he destroyed the walls of Kish and conquered it. And the main importance was too that he conquered Kazalu after it rebelled and kind of solidified that Babylon's independence from them because that was their former overlord. Like Babylon was ruled by Kazalu, and now that they control Kazalu, and Kazalu even tries to rebel, and they're like, "No, get back down," which is kind of just again, it's solidifying that Babylon is in control of
And
this
that
region.
actually, that's making me realize that you said earlier Kish was kind of one of the original major cities back in the day. And it's actually close, like Babylon is closer to Kish than any of these other cities we've been talking about. Like they're both way more north than Isin or Larsa.
And it
So
makes
it's
sense
kind of
because again,
funny.
that's where Sumer started. The Sumerian Empire started in Kish. That was
Yeah.
their capital. It was the
Yeah, it's
first city to ever have a king, at least in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, and then it's funny how it basically started there. It drifted south into Isin, then it drifted, well, and then and then at some point it was all the way in Ur and Uruk way down south. Then it was in Isin, and then it went back down south to like Larsa, and then pretty soon it's going to go back up north. So it's funny how the power shifts around.
In fact, that works to Babylon's, you know, success because Isin and Larsa are fighting over kind of the southern region, and Babylon's sort of
Mhm.
like there's this
Got its
uncharted
own.
northern region
Yeah.
that like is just a bunch of tiny little independent city states that's ripe for the taking. And Isin and Larsa are
Right.
too busy going for each other's throats to really.
Hmm. Definitely. I mean, that's such a classic thing in history is like two countries get obsessed with each other and keep fighting each other, and completely don't think about the rest of like their neighbors. And then that's when the neighbors either like conquer them or fight each other and
Spoiler
completely
alert for
situation.
Aser.
Well, yeah. So, did you want to get into Aser?
I don't actually have much about Aser. Sorry, I was just gonna finish with Samu Lael, and if you have some stuff about
Well, yeah. Well,
um
I think we should because I thought it was cool that in Aser there's this guy Sargon the First.
mhm.
So he was from technically from 1921 to 1881. So we could have mentioned him last episode, but um, they think that he got his name. The name means the king is legitimate in Akkadian, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, the king's legit. Trust me. My name is literally the king. I'm legit, and I'm also the king. And he might have been named after Sargon of Akkad, who's like the original like emperor. And it says that Akkad and Assyria were both Akkadian speaking. So most of these other cities we've been talking about speak, most of the common people speak Sumerian.
No, at
But
this time
am I
period
right?
most speak
Oh,
Akkadian.
because, oh, sorry, they speak Akkadian, but the rulers speak Sumerian, right?
Yes,
In
yes.
like their official writings, right, right. But here, even the rulers are Akkadian. And one thing, just while I'm looking at it, going back to Enlil, I just thought this was kind of cool. There's a Babylonian flood myth, and in that myth, Enlil is the cause of the flood, and it says that he sent it to exterminate the human race who made too much noise and prevented him from sleeping. But also, it's just so funny to me that like all these different regions like have such similar myths. That's just
Oh yeah.
cool. You grow up reading the Bible all about the flood, and it's actually like also this like Babylonian myth. It's essentially the same thing.
Hmm.
So, Sargon, yeah, I don't have much about him besides that he was probably named after Sargon of Akkad, and this is kind of the beginning, much like in Babylon. Asser is also kind of growing in power slowly. It's getting its footing. And yeah, we will definitely hear more about them later. But after Sargon, just real quick, the next king was Huzur Asher II from 1881 to 1873. And he came to the throne really late. It says that when he came to the throne, um, that I don't know, basically his son was like already kind of an adult. So anyway, he was sort of just an old ruler. I don't have much to say about him, but uh, who did you want to talk about next?
I mean, we're kind of at the end of my list. I just
Is
had a
that kind
few
of
more
it?
notes about
Okay,
uh,
same actually.
Sumer Lael. Just that one of the key things he did was
Well, sorry, who is Sumera El again? What?
the second king of Babylon,
Okay.
because he does these justice edicts, which cancels debts and provides economic relief for the people. And that's just important because it sets the stage for, I mean, spoiler alert a little bit, I guess, is a very common thing that Hammurabi does. So I just thought it was interesting.
I recommend, yeah, there's this book. That's funny because there's this book called Debt, the First 5,000 Years that I read, and it has a really boring title, but it's really good. And it talks a lot about that, how like canceling everyone's debts like that was like a somewhat common thing. I was like, all right, every like 30 years or just whenever things are getting bad, it's like, all right, cool, never mind, like no more debts. And it's just funny that it's such an ancient like concept, but nowadays that seems insane. Like
Yeah.
that's so, like that's the most like left position like you could have is like Bernie being like we're gonna and that's just like Bernie Sanders being like we're gonna cancel college debt or whatever, and that was like
Hmm.
super controversial. And back then, Sumiwell was like, all right, no more debts. They're all
Yeah.
just
He's just
and it
like,
makes
all
sense.
debts are
Like
gone.
if you want to keep like if the economy is like slowing down, it's like, all right, screw it, like reset. I'm hitting the
Yeah.
reset button. Um, so yeah, as you can tell, it was a time of a lot of competing powers and a lot of different rulers of cities.
And new players entering the battlefield.
Yep, some level one characters that are starting to grind,
Yeah.
getting more powerful. I'm just making sure before we sign off if there's everything I wanted to talk about. I feel like we really jumped right into it this episode. We just like locked in and started talking
Well,
about
it was an interesting time period for, I mean,
yeah.
because honestly, we debated doing 20 or 40 years and we stuck with 40. We'll probably go 20 next time, but because this was a lot going on. But it was very
Yeah.
interesting to see kind of just the fall of Isin, the rise of Larsa, but then Babylon is also in the back, just popping off. So it's crazy.
Yep. It's like they didn't even know what was cooking there. They're like, oh yeah, Isin or Larsa is going to be in charge, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the only other thing before we sign off was, I guess, sort of going back maybe to like this map real quick,
Hmm.
but apparently in more like what's modern Turkey now, on this map, I guess it would, I don't know, this map isn't really what I'm going to say, but in they have Assyrian trade colonies. So I guess the Assyrians had a colony in the city Kanesh, and they would kind of they're trading with, I guess, whatever's going on, like the Hittites and people in Europe. So It's far away from where we're talking about, but
Hmm.
it is cool to think that we haven't been touching on it, but there's all this stuff going on all around the world that we just don't have as much evidence of. But um, I don't know. Is there anything from this map that's jumping out to you?
Only just the Hittites up in the
Right.
top.
Yeah, the Hittites are
They're
going to come into play. And all right.
yeah.
The last thing was apparently in 1865, in particular, is essentially the end of the Norte Chico civilization in South America. And they were, uh, as far as I know, like the first like major civilization in the
We actually
Americas.
talked about them a little bit in episode one
We
and two.
mentioned them, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
they're collapsing. Their sites are being abandoned. The population's dispersing. There's probably climate shifts that affected coastal fishing and agriculture.
Same
But
with the
again,
Indus Valley civilization. The same thing's actually happening.
oh right, the Harappan, right?
Yeah. The cities are being abandoned, the people are leaving, getting more agrarian again. Or I guess hunter gatherer, pastoral.
So yeah, there
But
must be something going on, and even as we're talking about it, it's like even in Mesopotamia, it's a pretty unstable time. So we haven't really brought it up, but I would not be surprised if there's like a global kind of like climate shift. Like I don't know if it's getting
mhm.
drier or what's happening, but it's causing destabilization in several places. And except Egypt, I feel like that happens a lot though. Like we're going to see just not pretty far away in the future, but during the Bronze Age collapse, Egypt's one of the few countries that gets really injured, but is manages to like limp on, whereas like pretty much every other civilization completely just gets like wiped out
Yeah.
in that time. So Egypt's always kind of the exception of it's. It makes sense though because its climate is always kind of bad. It's just super dry desert that happens to be on a river.
Yeah.
So like it can't really get much worse. All right. Well, I don't know. Is there anything looking ahead to next episode? Like, what do you predict? We're gonna do 20 years.
I think we're going to do 20 years. We're going to be seeing Babylon rise and spread out. We're going to see Isin collapse even more. We're going to see Larsa get stronger, start to potentially rest on their laurels a little bit. But we've still got maybe half a century before Babylon really hits its stride.
Right. All right. Well, that is the Lost Decades podcast. Next episode, like we said, will be 1860 to 1840. Follow us on Instagram at Lost Decades Pod. If you keep wondering why we keep referencing maps when we're a podcast, check out our YouTube channel with the same name. And until next time, get lost.